Good evening, everyone. My name is Brendan Hogan, Chair of the Public Works Commission, calling this March meeting to order at 6:33. Welcome all. First item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Welcome a motion if anyone has one.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Barr. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
We have a second from Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco. Is there any discussion around that motion? All right, to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Any opposed? Agenda has passed. Onward to public forum. Lighter crowd than last time. Please maybe check on the phones, see if there's anyone interested in speaking at public forum online.
Chair Hogan, I do not see anybody from the public online at this time.
All right. And not seeing any in the room either, we will close public forum. Moving forward to number 4 on the agenda, the consent agenda. Is draft minutes from February's meeting and paperwork regarding complete streets for paving projects. There was some suggested edits to the minutes from last month that were circulated to the commission.
Can I make a motion to accept the consent agenda with the edits submitted?
You may. Got that motion, Commissioner Barr. Thank you.
Seconded.
We have a second from Commissioner Fox. Thank you. Any discussion around that?
I think we just confirmed that those are edits proposed by Commissioner Overby, Commissioner Damiani, and by staff.
Yes. Thank you for that. Any other discussion?
Can I just ask a question about the complete streets? The ones are listed for like Clark Street and there's one other one too that are maybe will be done as if there's availability. Can you explain what that would be? I know I actually had somebody at the NPA meeting come to me and say, what can I do about getting Clark Street fixed? And I'm like very happy to be able to send them this, but I wanted to know what that really might mean for them and paving in Clark Street.
Sure. We bid this year's work with a couple ad alternates, just depending on how the bids came in. Last couple of years have been very difficult bid environment. We were exceptionally pleased this year to get 3 bidders. Last couple of years, we've had 1 bidder each year. It was a much more competitive environment this year. And as a result, it looks like we're going to be able to add, I believe, Riverside in, but I'm not sure about Clark Street. Does anybody on staff know about Clark Street?
Yeah, so at the moment,
You want to come up and just make sure you're on the microphone?
my first time on the stand.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So,
Swear in.
yeah, at the moment, basically, if we have the funding available after we pave our other streets, we will be able to pave Clark Street, but we don't want to make the promise to the public that we will be paving it until we're sure that we've secured that funding after all the other work is completed. So as long as the money is available, we do plan on doing Clark for CY23, but it's contingent on that.
When would you know that you had the money? What is there a time frame that you think it would be that they would find out if it's going to be done?
Yeah, so that would be after all of the work is completed for our other streets, which I would think would be at the end of the summer. Is that fair to say?
That's a good timeline.
Like September, August?
I would say September.
Okay, I will get back to them.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. And we can certainly keep the commission informed as the year advances. We are pinched because of the inflationary environment and because the voters approved a smaller package this year for capital work. Well, last year in the 2022 town meeting day vote, $23.8 million bond. Originally, we asked for $40 million, and that was not approved. So the amount for paving is compressed, and so we're trying to do as much as we can with that limited budget.
I just didn't want to promise something without being real clear about what the situation is for them. So thanks for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion that's been seconded. Any other discussion around that motion? All right, excuse me, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving forward, item 5, parking services enforcements in Burlington Parks and Recreation and Waterfront lots.
Yes. So, oh, I'm gonna get promoted here. Let me get promoted. I won't have a presentation, but my name is Jeff Paget. I am the division director for parking and traffic. And Cindy White said she was gonna be here tonight, but I don't see her. So basically, Parks and Rec and Waterfront and parking services and traffic group and parking facilities have all been sort of working together for the past couple of years, trying to build what we're calling this one-stop shop for parking services. And one of the hiccups that we've had is that the authority that we get to enforce in lots is articulated in Appendix C in what I call our appendix, which is all of our rules. Parks Authority they have the authority to enforce in their lots, and that's articulated in Appendix D. So we want to work together with Parks. Parks wants to work with us, and we want to enforce in their lots. But because they had authority in Appendix D and we had authority in Appendix C, it was actually if we just went forward with our authority to enforce in their lots and they had it, we would have sort of a quasi double jeopardy situation where theoretically 2 different city entities could give us 2 different tickets for the same violation. So Cindy went to her commission and she's headed to the city council. She has a different process for changing her rules to take parking out of their authority and defer that authority to us. So before city council passes that, I'm coming to you to get authority to recognize parks lots in section 18 of Appendix C. And then in section 19, what did we do to 19? 19 goes with 18. What the heck did we do? For the rates, we referenced that because we identify the lots and we articulate the rates in our Appendix C. Well, they have enforcement and rates in theirs. So what I've done, so 18 now takes over their lots. 19 references their ordinance for any rate structure. So it's all tight. So what I'm asking for tonight is to add the parks lots to section 18 and then add a reference to parks rates in section 19. And then also some house cleaning relative to 194 St. Paul's, which apparently wasn't in there. Should have been. So that's a nutshell.
Great, thank you for that. Bring it back for commissioner discussion on this. Commissioner Damiani.
The only question I had was in terms of additional staffing needs because of the additional enforcement that DPW would be taking on.
Right. So from our perspective, so we have the platform, we have the infrastructure. We used to have 5 what we're called parking enforcement officers. Now we have 14 positions. We have 10. We have 10 filled now parking service agents. Mm-hmm. So we have a dramatic, and we could have 14. So we have 4 positions open. So we have a dramatic increase in enforcement capacity. But one of the items I think we talked about at the last meeting is license plate recognition. Right. So we're still working towards that. And a big reason we would like license plate recognition technology available to us is so that we can actually drive through Letty and look for people who haven't paid. Drive through the garages and look for people who haven't paid. It would dramatically streamline our operations. So we're very cognizant. We believe we have the horsepower to do it right now, but license plate recognition, LPR, OCR is
Great.
Thank you. Commissioner Montana.
I'm sorry, another note, a corollary to that is we write ticket, just like when we write a ticket in the garage, that revenue doesn't go to the garage. The $15 ticket, it goes to the parking services, which is a general fund. So when we write a ticket to BPRW lots, they won't get the $15 fine. That will come to us. So we will have some of our
Additional
costs
revenue.
subsidized by that.
Very good, thanks.
Yeah, I love talking about parking. I guess my first question is, what's the enforcement like now? Like, what does the Parks Department do, and what are the rates? If you have that
They
info.
do not have a robust parking enforcement regime. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that's why we're taking over, because they recognize they haven't been effective in their enforcement. They have had a variety of ad hoc approaches. So I can't really speak to all of it, but it was not what they needed it to be. They recognized we could bring professional edge to it.
Yeah, it's good to be impartial in that respect. I guess my other question is in the third paragraph of the background section. You distinguish between the traffic ticket, that would be the penalty in this case, versus a civil ticket.
Yeah.
But then you say this traffic ticket has more less severe legal ramifications. So
Oh.
is it more severe or less severe? And
Sorry.
really, what is the difference?
That's a typo. Apologies. No, a traffic ticket is a more simple ticket. A traffic ticket is appealed through the city process and then goes to court as I'm not sure if I get the word right, but more like a is what do you, like more like a small claim, more like a small claims style court situation. Whereas a civil penalty is what you get if you're in a bar fight or you stabbed, something like that. It's a much more aggressive, it's a more like violence isn't involved. So no, a traffic ticket is a more appropriate ticket to be issued for parking rather than a civil ticket.
Civil versus criminal.
Civil.
It's less severe.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
But
sorry, that's-
yeah, unruly, violent, or destructive behavior
Yeah.
being more of the civil
Yeah.
ticket
Yes.
thing.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. At least for some of those lots, I guess it's possible that Parks Department might still be kind of monitoring the lots for maybe some of those other things.
Yeah, and I've already talked to Cindy, and we're exploring what authority they would have under our ordinance, because Appendix C, there are our rules, but there's nothing. We have to explore the legal structure around how they would enforce our appendix versus their appendix, and that's a conversation I need to have with our legal team, with Cindy, and see what they're, are they do we have Jackie hand them a handheld and they write the tickets, or or do they just monitor and then we come and enforce? We gotta work that out.
Interesting. Byzantine even. But thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Overby.
I know we communicated a little bit about the waterfront north lot.
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know that that's listed on this document, but it could be that it's in 1 through 6.
Yeah, it might already been 1 through 6. We'll check.
Do we-
I'll check to double
yeah.
check to make sure.
So I was just concerned that it hadn't showed up. I know that was a little bit of an odd lot that's got the 40-year private, contract set on it, but still, there are meters there, so
Yep.
It
No,
would-
I'll double check that it's there, because just like in this memo, we added 194 because that was an oversight, 194 St. Paul
Right.
Street at the Champlain.
And it came up in the other document that we're talking about later in this meeting about all the parking study for the Main Street thing. So that's another reason why I saw there was a piece missing. So
Yep.
as long as it is listed as one of the municipal parking lots on all the places it's supposed to be, that would be great.
That's the intent.
Yeah, yes. Appreciate you pointing these things out to us. We don't see everything.
I love maps.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Fox.
I'll say I'm really supportive of this, push to have DPW take over or enforcement of these parking lots. It's really great to see the city kind of making that efficiency across departments. I think that is, really good sign of that collaboration. I guess an additional comment to that was that it would be great to hear from parks, like how this is going to impact them. So if at some point we can hear from Cindy or some other representative about like how the process has gone through there, Parks, Rec, and Waterfront Commission or whatever, I think that would be helpful. And then I know that the other things on this are housekeeping, but I did have a question about the 194 lot designation. I guess just looking for clarification on like what metered versus permitted entails in terms of enforcement. So will permits still be sold and enforced with a metered designation? So it's going to be both instead of just the one? Is that?
Yeah, so that lot is metered by kiosks. There's
Right.
2 kiosks. And then we also sell 20 permits in that lot. And they can park in any spot just without paying the kiosk.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's all I had.
All right, thanks. Commissioner Barr.
You answered my questions about the revenue, but I guess I would like to just weigh in. I'm supportive of this, but I'd like to weigh in that there just needs to be some really clear, defined how they get it enforced by DPW's people, by the parking department, just so that they know. And I know
Absolutely.
you intended, you said your intent was to make that happen. Even if signage in there says this lot is enforced.
If you go to Letty right now, they just put kiosk in Letty and they're going to start charging for parking there. And the sign is a Parks sign, brown sign with the Parks B on it. And at the bottom it says parking managed and enforced by DPW.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
clear that
Yeah, those
we're
are the
managing
things.
the law.
And I know that those will come, but I just wanted it on the record that
For sure.
one of the concerns that I might have in the future.
Yes.
But I'm very supportive. Thanks.
Vice Chair Neovavanko.
All right, yes, I'm also supportive of cross-departmental efficiencies. Do you foresee any time in the future where the rates would dovetail? Because right now from what I understand, Parks is still going in the rates are referenced to Parks setting them.
Yes.
Is there a time when you see DPW actually fully dating or?
So we've committed, I didn't, you guys know Jackie Esperti, she's the parking services manager, I'm sorry. She's running this show. So our first goal is to get the authority to actually do this enforcing, right? And then we've committed to parks to have all of their permits digital in our system by this season. So we have to make all the permits first, and we've already sort of hashed through them and started to understand their structure. And their structure is, let's just say it can be streamlined. They have like a $25 permit, a $35 permit, a $30 permit, a $40 permit. This is like all these like $5. It's just very complicated. So I anticipate that after we get all these permits made, Jackie and her team, that we will then recycle back to parks, give them our feedback on workflow, customer experience, and just trying to streamline that. So it's parks revenue, so I think they will always have it in their appendix and in their ordinance that they have control over. But we will certainly be operationally involved and help with the customer experience.
And is there communication outreach going out to folks who regularly get the season passes to park at Oakledge or whatever, that not just the sign, but that comes with the permit, the information that the enforcement will be through Public Works?
We're going to have to work through parks with that. We see ourselves as providing the back end service, and they're the shop and we're the cash register. That's kind of where I'm seeing that relationship at this point. I don't know how that will evolve in the future as far as the concept of our one-stop shop and having a single rate page. We're a little bit away from that, but certainly that's where we're headed.
Okay. And I agree with Commissioner Fox. It would be great to have someone from Parks, Rec, and Waterfront to bounce some of these concerns and questions over.
Sure.
And then finally, really just to echo what some of the other commissioners said, wondering where that non-parking issue enforcement in a Parks and Rec car park, whose eyes are on what different activities, and then what's reported to whom, like what's sort of the kind of where the responsibility leaves Public Works and then goes to the police or back to Parks and Rec.
But at this point, we're fully expecting to patrol their lots. I see this summer, we're gonna have somebody going through Letty. I always use Letty because it's big, right?
Yeah.
As an example, going through and typing plate numbers in, because that's how we're doing it for almost 1,600 spaces in the 2 parking garages. That's how we're doing it now there, and it's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna have to do it that way, Letty. We fully expect that we're gonna be out there doing that.
Can you get an electric an e-assist bike with a portable license plate reader?
Well, I would love to have the
We'd
license
love to
plate
see
reader, and then
portable
we'll figure out
license
what kind of
Yeah.
vehicle we put it on. But we're working on that front too. So.
Okay.
There is talk of, just some logistic stuff. So back end, we're talking about creating a really streamlined front end for our customer. This one-stop shop sounds simple. Back end, which is what we're wrestling with, is hugely complicated because we have revenues now coming in to different locations. We have revenues in the garages going to one budget. We have revenues on the streets coming in on another budget. We have revenues coming in for citations on another budget, and it's all funneling through the same software, and it's all going to different accounts, different sub-accounts, different physical banks. So we're working with CT Office really closely to sort of untangle that back-end spaghetti, make sure all the money's flowing all the right places. And it's a big effort. We've been working on it for months now. So there's a lot back-end administration that's happening to support what is going to ostensibly appear very simple.
That's great. I'm appreciative of that work, Jackie. Looking at you right now, recognizing that, like the ducks sailing through the water and then their feet are shuffling underneath. I think you're those feet shuffling. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Quick follow on there as part of that organization or clarifying around the buckets of money, the inputs feeding different outputs. Do you anticipate any ask of city council for like different flexibility or options of how money could be spent?
No, not as part of this. I
Mhm.
mean, that is something, so it was always an undercurrent for me because I'm always looking to find a new creative way to do something. And sometimes there are ordinances that put guardrails on things and fall against the guardrails sometimes. So sort of an undercurrent of everything we're trying to do is figure out cleaner, neater, better, tighter ways to do what we do. So I come to you to change these ordinances so it can reflect our goals and I think what are your and community goals. So, yeah, we're always thinking. I think that's a nice segue to our next topic tonight.
Very good. All right, nothing further from my end. Thank you for that. Mr. Goulding, could we check on the phone and see if anyone's interested in speaking to public comment on this item?
There are no members of the public currently in queue.
All right, thank you. And none in the room. That said, I'll bring it back to the commission. There's some suggested language around the ordinance changes that are in front of us here.
Gonna make a motion to accept. That's staff's recommendation. It's stated in the document. I can read it.
Yes.
You want me to read it?
No, that's right. We got it.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Commissioner Barr.
A little amendment in Appendix C, Section 18, Part B, lines 11 and 12. The word "the" is repeated twice in both of those. So I would strike the second and fourth "thes." They're not reduplicated.
Is it?
Yep, I see it. In
Yeah.
11 and 12. Good catch. Thank you.
And making sure we got this correct. Was that a second from Commissioner Damiani? With a suggested edit from Commissioner Montano. It seems Friendly to the motioner? Honorary to the seconder? Okay. As I understand it, most of that stuff gets sort of read through by legal before it.
That's what the comment,
Goes to the
part of
books.
the motion approval is as approved by the city attorney. So, city attorney would most likely catch that too, but I appreciate you catching
When's the right time to bring it up?
it. That's good. It's all good.
Any other discussion around the motion? All right, let's go to a vote then. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Moving forward, and
All right.
welcome back. Parking fine reform.
Let me get my screen shared. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna preface this with I feel like I say this every day, is parking is complicated, and we try to think through thoroughly what we're trying to do with goals and expectations and unintended consequences and all these things. So what we're so this slide deck is a little bit drawn out, and that's funny. And one thing I didn't address actually is how this integrates with Whoops, but that's something we've got to do.
Internal note to self.
That's a note to self right there, right up front. I can't be more transparent. So anyway, so this deck sort of pulls this concept apart. How do we deal with parking infractions and what is appropriate penalties? So I just want to lay the groundwork of how ticketing and towing basically works in Burlington right now. Is meter violations, you don't pay your meter, you get a ticket, you don't get towed. It's a $15 ticket, you don't get towed. No parking violations, which is things like resident parking areas are restricted to only people with permits. So that's considered a no parking zone as it's identified. It's no parking unless you have a permit. So resident parking, here to corner, hydrants, time limited, anything where you're prevented from parking in a location is what's called a no parking area. However, operationally, RPP, resident parking, has not been towed. That's just been the historical operating way things have been done. And there's also been, we've noticed inconsistent approaches to other no parking violations over time throughout the city. So it concerns us that enforcement's not always consistent and not consistent with ordinance. So we're trying to clean this all up. So, but we also recognize that it can also be done in a more nuanced way so that the penalty for no parking, so there can be more creative approaches to no parking penalties. So this deck is an introduction to our thinking around this. And it's really, I'm going to go through it sort of methodical way, but it's intended to explain what we're thinking and get your feedback. So please interrupt me. I'm going to sort of march if I can, but interrupt me if something doesn't make sense. So, and just to be clear, Jackie and I sat for hours trying to pull this apart and tease it out and try to get to some resolution that makes sense. So again, everything we're talking about in this slide deck is related to no parking violations. We're not talking about people parked at meters or parked in the garages. So we identified some structural goals that we wanted to hit. We want to enhance the educational aspect of a ticket. Fundamentally, we don't want to look at a ticket as punishment. We want to look at it as an education opportunity, like stubbing your toe on the corner of your bed. You don't want to do it, but you learn. Okay. We want to support the appropriate enforcement of public safety, equitable access to parking, neighborhood expectations, like RPP, and business needs, like time-limited parking downtown. And then we also would need to maintain efficient office workflows. If we've got to go read through a whole flow chart for every ticket we write, it's going to just be really cumbersome and inconsistent for the public. They're not going to know what's going on. So those are structural goals. Our intended impact on the community is to balance the penalty with the offense, lower the social impact relative to minor first offenses, and maintain the ability to enforce important ordinances related to safety and equity. So our structural goals and our intended impacts are kind of the same concepts, just looking at them sort of from a different angle. So our approach is to create some sort of progressive penalty scale that's based on a type of violation and a frequency of violation. So basically, what have you done and have you done it before? That's the simple way to think of that. But we also need to make sure that it's a simple enough approach that we can apply it equally across all no parking areas in the city so people don't get confused, because people get confused really easily, and I don't blame them. I've had my car towed. Frustrating. So the framework we're proposing is level 1 and level 2. So level 2 is a standard penalty. It's what we're doing now. The ordinance has shall language in it, and if this is a second offense, if the violation represents a threat to safety or equity, that's level 2. You're getting what's happening today. You park in front of a fire hydrant, that's level 2. You're getting ticketed and towed because that's a safety violation, threatens the safety and equity of the city. Level 1 is what we're thinking of as this new sort of category of penalties. So it's like for a first offense, and if the violation represents more of an inconvenience than really a safety or equity thing, and it would feel more appropriate that you would get a slap on the wrist for this type of offense. So again, this is a framework of how we're approaching. And we don't know exactly, we'll get to what these options might be on the next couple of slides, but this is sort of the ideas. We have sort of a detuned approach, and then we have the standard approach. So we're calling it alternative ticket and tow versus current ticket and tow. So when we're ticketing and towing, we have 3 options for each. For tickets, we can give a warning. We can give a half price, or I call it half price because that's easy. Some sort of percentage, 20% off, 60% off, whatever. But I call it half price. Or full ticket. So nothing, a modified ticket, or full ticket. And in towing, we have similar options. Don't tow them. Tow them in a couple hours when they wake up and come out and move their car. Or tow them right away. And we need to mix those up in creative ways to figure out what's the right approach. And we need to meet these goals that I've already stated: public safety, equitable access, neighborhood expectations, business needs, education of the person, and then workflow for us. So I made this matrix. This is where I'm patient and pay attention because it's complicated. So here's our tow options and our ticket options. These are our goals. And Jackie and I sat down and we went through each of these scenarios and we said, okay, does a warning and a no tow address our goals? And if it addressed the goal, we gave it a capital A. If it clearly addressed the goal, capital A, capital B, capital C. If it sort of addressed the goal, but it's kind of a pain for some reason, or it was just not clear, then we gave it a lowercase, but it still addressed the goal. If it doesn't address the goal at all, we gave it nothing. So we went through, as basically the goal here is to figure out which of these mixtures creates the most compliance with our goals. So this is what we came up with. So if you look at the warning no tow, I'm going to start in the upper left. It meets the public safety goal because remember, everything in level 1 is not a threat to public safety. So everything in here has got an A because by definition, this is an inconvenience situation, right? But a warning and no tow is kind of a pain for us just from a workflow perspective. And it's not terribly good education because you just got a warning. It was just a piece of paper that you threw in the glove box or on the background or whatever. So we didn't think that was a particularly viable option. And then delayed tow and tow don't apply because we can't tow anybody if we don't give them a ticket. You have to have a ticket to be towed. So those just don't apply. So then we looked at a half price ticket with no tow. And again, public safety it met. Doesn't necessarily meet neighborhood expectations, and it kind of depends on what your neighborhood expectation is. If you live in an RPP zone, some people wholeheartedly expect every single car that doesn't have a permit to be towed right away. And some people have more compassionate opinions. So it doesn't really squarely meet the neighborhood expectations because it's not meeting everybody's. And also, it's not as good an education because it's half price and you didn't get towed. And again, all of these really have some workflow issues related to them. So we didn't like that particularly well. Similar idea with half price and delayed tow, except you notice delayed tow doesn't even have the F in it because that's such a pain for us to give a different style, a reduced ticket. And if we give the ticket, then we got to wait around. Let's say we're not going to tow somebody for 2 hours after we give them a ticket. Well, now we got to stand around and wait, right? So we got to babysit this car for whatever this delay period is, right? So that's just operationally very wobbly for us. So we said, get rid of that one. So then we got to full ticket tow. Well, that's what level 2 is. So throw that one out. So now we're left with these 3. So these 3 now do something interesting. Each of them does something interesting. So a full ticket, no tow it does meet this neighborhood expectation thing, sort of the way Half Price did, but it's much better education because they're actually getting a real legit ticket, full ticket, $75, and you learn something from that, but you didn't get towed. So it's a nice no tow option, right? So we get to delayed tow, similar scenario, but again, notice F isn't on there. And then we get full ticket, or we get a half price ticket and tow. Again, we have, this meets a lot of our goals because we by towing somebody right off, we do get that equity piece. If somebody's parked in a 15-minute spot, well, that 15-minute spot is there for some equitable reason. Business has said we need this spot to run our business, so there's an equity component in there. So the next 3 slides actually I get into sort of describing in detail how these are met. So here's one. So there's no B because the vehicle was not removed. We haven't addressed equity there. C is lowercase because it does remove the vehicle, but it's on the second offense. It does have some teeth. There's no D because if you don't tow somebody who's parked in that 15-minute spot right in front of their business, they're not, that's not really solving their problem. They need to do, like I think Leonardo's I have in my head, right? They're cycling cars in and out of their 15-minute spot all day long. That's a critical part of their business. If the car is blocking that it can't sit there. It has to be moved because they need to run their business. So education, they do get educated because they have to pay the ticket. It's additional back office work for us, but we can do that, doing that conditional, figuring out whether or not to tow or not. Option 2, similar. It removes the vehicle eventually. So that supports equity, supports neighborhood expectations, supports business needs, but not particularly well. You do get educated, but here again, we just talked about there's no F because now we got to give the ticket and now we got to wait around and watch this car. This is the one where we delay the tow. And then the third, it removes the vehicle promptly, so we get equity, we get meet neighborhood expectations, we meet business needs, they get fully educated, and we have this back office thing we have to do conditional, but we can do that. So these are the preferred. This is a preferred suite of ideas because they meet the most goals in that matrix, and we like having, even though number 1 only has 3 goals met, we like having the option of a no tow penalty on the board. But how do we apply these? There's 3 different conditions. We've got like 65 different violations we write, and I think probably 40 of them are no parking, 40 or 50 are no parking. So we need to go through, because we need to minimize complexity. We can't be writing a lot of different tickets. So types of tickets conditionally. So we need to go through and look at every penalty or every violation and figure out which one of these three really addresses the intent of that violation. Because every one of our violations has a safety or equity bent to it. Some of them are safety and equity. Some of them are pure safety, and some of them are pure equity. So what I see as the next step is figuring out how to apply these and seeing if all three apply. Then we use all three. If we can figure out a way to get one of these to work everywhere, that'd be really sweet, because that really simplifies our world. But parking's complicated. So, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Among those 40 to 50 violations, how many are tows? Or like, what fraction
Well, that's what I'm saying.
of the shall tows are actually
That's what
tows? And if they're towed, is it just out of the loading zone, or are they going to lanes to
well,
pick
some of them. So everything I'm talking about tonight is all no tow stuff, or no parking stuff. So it's all tow.
Where are the
Everything
cars
that's
going?
considered everything that's considered no parking gets towed. It's a good question though, because we do, for different infractions, we will tow street to street in town to save somebody that whole trip all the way out to Splains, and save them $20 and save them the exposure to the $30 the next day. Is that how we normally do most tows downtown, unless it's Scott?
No, I would say the majority of them do go to Splains.
Majority goes. Which ones do we just tow street to street?
Like the no parking, like the Main Street ones.
Oh, right. The yellow signs. Like when you see the yellow signs out that say no parking because of like construction or something's happening, if you park there, you get towed street to street.
Right.
That must be an ordinance to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, a mile away still, so someone still has to walk.
Yeah, they still get mad,
Yeah.
rightfully so, because they got to walk a mile.
Relocating their car.
But
Yeah.
we know.
But much less expensive
Right.
and closer than Splains.
So most tows go to Splains. Yep. So, like I said, next steps, I want to get some feedback on this thought process. Both the framework, the sort of two-step framework, and these three alternative ticket approaches, because then we can go back and move positively and concretely, looking at the list of violations and apply to the best of our judgment which of those ticket and tow options applies to the various, and then bring those back to you, explain to you how that all works, and then within the next month we can get that package together, get it to you, get your endorsement, and then within the next, I'd say 4 to 6 months, we got to change ordinance. Some ordinance in chapter 20 you have the authority to change, some ordinance you don't have the authority to change. So I need to work with legal to make sure that I want to get your approval with everything we do, but I might have to go to council to actually get ordinance physically changed. There's always lots of coming in from the sides ordinances that you got to clean up in this process. So it's going to take a little while, and then we still have to, after we get all that done, then we have to build our back office system, and then we have to get the word out. So there's some grind left to this project, but we're trying to get it right because we really want our ordinances. We want our ordinances to reflect the values of our community, and we want our tickets to be written consistently and appropriately all the time. That's what we're working towards. I think this will help. So that's it. Thank you for being patient listening.
Thanks as well to Commissioner O'Neill Vivanco for raising this issue a couple months ago, and your patience in getting a larger look at this, more than just one particular type of violation. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Bring it back to the commissioner for discussion at this time. Commissioner Fox?
Well, I guess the question I had is, have you done like a demo or like a test, applied any of these options to specific violations and how have they worked? Like, have you kind of gauged that at all, or no?
Well, I did do a first run through, and I started trying to apply a, where I could do alternative. And as I was, something alternative, I hadn't decided what that might be, but what could I do alternative? And that was when I realized, oh shoot, this might not be so simple, because I can't just do this option here, because if I do this, this is the option I choose. I can't do it here because it doesn't make sense down here. I gotta do something different down there. I'm like, oh man, now I gotta sit down. I gotta make a matrix. Jackie, we gotta flesh this out. So I guess to answer your question, I'd say we did test it in the field, but it got tested because I tried to do it and it wouldn't work.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, as much as we would like it to be, parking is never black and white, unfortunately. And what I appreciate about the consideration to restructure this is that I think it gives you that flexibility to be a little more gray with situations that are gray, right? That makes sense. I don't know. Kind of digesting information, so I don't know if I can come back in a little bit.
Sure.
But kind of all I had for right now.
Commissioner Barr.
Sure. So I guess I'll preface by saying I've got some 18 years in parking, whether that's good or bad. One of the things that was challenging at my previous position was that I think there was way too much giving. I mean, there was like 10 tickets and then a tow, and there were different levels within each 3, and it was very complex. So I love that you're trying to become a little more progressive, but you're also trying to structure it from the beginning. I think that's important because, I mean, having it, you can almost do anything you want. To a ticket and a tow was really what I felt like Burlington was always about. To have something in between, little discretion for the parking attendants is something that's good. It makes them feel good because then they can make some decisions while they're out in the field. And it also is it's more receptive of the Burlingtonians, people that are here. The one challenge that any parking policy or process has is with visitors. And you just need to make sure as much as possible that the rules are clear.
Yeah.
I mean, and that they're not so different from other places that when somebody comes from Boston or comes from somewhere else, that we just have this weird off one. But if you park in front of a fire hydrant, I mean, in most places you get towed. You park in a handicapped space and you're not handicapped, you should get towed.
So just a point of clarification is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bake the flexibility into the system, because it's been made clear to us by our legal team that our parking service agents actually have no discretion in the field. And that's part of the problem. And this is a way we're getting around that no discretion, is by giving them structured discretion, so to speak. They don't have it, but we're giving them that structure, because it becomes a constitutional issue of, sort of, no due process, right?
Right.
Another, just an aside, one of the things that we're also about communication is Alan Mashtar is a new traffic manager. That's the team that I also lead, that does all the signs. And he's looking at the cost and feasibility and timeline and implications of actually putting those little signs that have tow truck pictures on them. And we're trying to figure out just how much work that is, how much is it going to cost, and will it really make an impact? That's something we're attacking this on multiple fronts.
And I'm a big believer in actually putting some information on the actual citation that you give people, because 9 times out of 10, let's say somebody who's honest and made a mistake will read the ticket and hopefully learn from it. Those that throw it on the ground, whatever, but at least you've done as much as you can by putting the information clearly on the ticket. This is why you're getting this.
Well, one of the things we're contemplating operationally is we have the ability to print out a non-ticket ticket. I don't want to call it a warning; it's a notice.
Yeah.
And so if we come to a 2-hour parking area, we can theoretically go and start and we measure where stem is on the tire. And it's 7 o'clock.
Chalking,
but
yeah.
It's called chalking. You know, we use chalk. There's the stem. And when that gets piped into the handheld, we can actually print out a little ticket, put it on the windshield that says, hey, at 2 o'clock, we started the clock on your car. It's a 2-hour zone. If we come back in 2 hours, you're probably going to get ticketed and towed. There are some real operational hurdles to that, just in volume of tickets that aren't tickets that we would be writing. So we have to work through that. But our intention is to do things like that to better communicate with people that, hey, you park somewhere and guess what? We're watching you. And if you don't move, we're going to get a ticket and you're going to get towed too. Or whatever we come up with in our aggressive scheme. So.
Parking is very emotional. So it's the first and last thing you do. If that's a good experience, then everything else is good.
Very good, thank you. Vice Chair O'Neill-Vivanco.
Thank you. Thank you so much for digging into this. And I know you're still diving in, so I really do appreciate it. My concern bringing this up was originally because because towing hadn't been enforced on a street that is not resident only, but is surrounded by resident only streets. So there's timed 4-hour parking. So then it just seemed like I saw cars getting towed and it felt like, oh, is this predatory? And so to have the public understand one system where, oh, you get a ticket and you learn, and then shift to the actual enforcement of the ordinance, right? Am I using the right language?
Well, it'll all be an ordinance, but yes.
Which was the car shall be towed, ticketed and towed, was seemed like enforcement without education. So I appreciate all of these options, and I'm for the full ticket, no tow, fitting in with your Whoops program in the ideal world. But whatever matrix cube you go through, the education piece, I think, needs to be kind of clearly thought through. And then thinking, then when, I thought about, the towing piece. And I've lived in Washington, D.C., I've lived in New York, I've lived in Boston. I mean, where it's almost like, a hobby for you to get booted. But that was, you got 3 tickets in DC. I mean, this is a long time ago, but I think you got 3 tickets. I never got booted, just for the record here, but you knew that was the eventual consequence if you got 3 tickets. So that kind of clarity in decoding the ordinance would be helpful for, to communicate that to the public and then also to visitors. So if you go down a street and see a residential street and you see the towing thing, what's the image? What are the values that Burlington wants to kind of put forth? So I think there is something like that we need to consider as far as what are the different, and I know you said there are 50 different types of tickets, but if we look at a business district versus a residential district, are there ways to think about them a little bit differently every time, you do your matrix?
No, I imagine that's how these 3 we might end up with all 3 of these functioning for 3 different, and like you say, we have to come up with some justification for why we've applied one version of progression versus another version, and maybe it is business downtown improvement district versus resident only, so that's very much part of the next step of this.
Right, but while keeping in mind the F, which I forget what the F stands for, the workflow,
Yes.
making this so that it really is operationally possible for your back end folks as well as your front end, your parking enforcement folks to be able to manage, that it isn't just this mind-boggling, like, wait, where am I now? So I kind of recognize all those challenges. So I think keep on keeping on. And we look forward to kind of hearing more about, any categories that some of those 40 or 50 parking infractions kind of fall into certain buckets. But with the goal of whatever we do, that education piece is really key. And what are the values of our city that we want to put forth to residents, visitors, in the downtown area. Again, thank you.
Commissioner Overby.
I commend you in this analysis of this. This is just great. I love this kind of thing. I think you've done a great job of thinking it through. And it is, I see how it is complicated, but I also want to say I really appreciate the focus on the education and behavior change, because I know, the comparison, you're either you want to improve safety and behavior or you want to raise revenue. And so, we always hear about people that have speed traps and all these other things that are specifically like, so the question always is, are we trying to improve the safety and all those factors you came up with? Or are we trying to find ways to raise revenue? And clearly you're making it very clear that the goal is not to raise revenue and penalize people. So I really appreciate that part of the background of some of this. And there's sort of two different audiences in some ways. We have the population of people that are regular residents that park, so the educational value, it has a different impact than a visitor who will come and be here for the first time. And so in some ways you have to, the way that we do this, to me, you almost have a slightly different thing going on there. So somebody that first visits, the option for half price and tow isn't quite the same. It's a little bit different of an experience for a visitor. That's like, the tow thing is probably not the greatest way to go with the visitor first time. So anyway, just an observation. I don't know how you would actually factor that in, and because really, it's fairness is fair, but my thought is that the educational part of it is going to be more relevant to the people who live here and, might do these various things and be shocked about what happened. So one question I had about the frequency of violations, is this, how does that factor into this? So is this like the alternate that you get when it's the first offense type of thing? And then you're just into the normal routine when it comes to be second and more?
That's
Okay,
the
so this
thinking
is
right
just
now,
that
and-
first.
And if it's one per year or two per year or one for every 2 years, we still got to resolve that, because getting back to, you mentioned revenues, we do have a very keen focus on being equitable and being nice about parking, but there is also the reality that this department, this group, is a contributor to the general fund, and we understand that the general fund depends on us they do depend on us for a measurable amount of money. So we have to be cognizant that we can't just give everything away for free, because we are a participating part of the city revenue stream. So something we balance.
Well, it's their counter thing. If everybody was perfectly well behaved and never did a no parking violation, we would have no revenue. So, we cannot, it's sort of like, it's like taking money from gambling to pay for education. Like, if we really want to have, we have a lot of bad behavior that we have taxes on, and if people really were good and didn't do that bad behavior, we wouldn't have that revenue. So we have a sort of mixed problem here, and but I appreciate what you're doing is you're trying to make it appear equitable, so that if somebody does get a ticket and they owe the $75 or even the $15 at the parking meter, they should go. It's a civic contribution in a lot of ways to this community.
that on the
Honestly, I think that if I ever get a parking ticket, I go, I messed up. I didn't get back in time. $15. My contribution to this community. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad attitude to take, but most people probably don't think that way.
Of which we just gave $37,000 to Feeding Chittenden as part of our Fines for Food program. So it's even more than contributing to the city government, we're actually contributing to our local.
Well, any of these fees, I don't know how you market it, but any of these fees, that's part of the education. We put the money towards something that is toward these safety things and making sure businesses have places to park. So I don't know how you're going to factor that in, except maybe you could put a little smiley thing on the bottom of their ticket that says, your contribution. Don't feel bad. Your contribution. You're making a contribution, even though it's painful right now. You're making a contribution to the civic life here in Burlington. So it's just an idea. So I think that was, so you had the three that I'm getting. You've got full ticket, no tow. You have full ticket, delayed tow, and you have half price ticket and tow.
Or some percentage thereof.
Or percentage tier. Yeah,
But
right,
yes,
right.
we'll have price
Okay.
for now.
I think it's great, and I hope you keep working on it, and it I think it's looking really great. So thank you very much for that effort.
Thank you. Commissioner Montano.
I really love the Burlington Code of Ordinance, and especially Appendix 3, the traffic commissions, actually where all of these different parking conditions are present and possibly enforced. I don't drive, but let's pretend I did, and I parked on St. Paul Street between Maple and Main Street. It's a 3-hour parking zone, but let's say I left the car there for 3.5 hours. Shall I be towed? Like, what are the odds that I shall be towed? Like, for all of these different violations, I understand safety, but for all of the equity violations,
Yeah.
are people being towed daily?
So, well, yeah, people are towed every day. No, we're towed. How many cars do you think we're towed?
Yeah, 10.
10 per day.
Today was a slow day. Because tonight's gonna be a busy night.
Yes, we should say on TV, it's snow ban, parking ban tonight, so please, we don't want to tell you. Dearly. And we do have a dedicated crew. Everybody should know we have, 6 people staying up all night tonight? 7 to run the show, to just managing. That's not including any of the plow drivers. That's just our crew managing towing cars and keeping track of where all those cars are and being here at 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody calls and says, "Where's my car?" So it's a big, big effort. I say thank you every time. These folks, it's a lot of work. But to your question about the St. Paul Street, this is a challenge because those are meters. But it also is time limited within the context of a meter. It's different than if you have a 15.
Well, I broke the law. I'm a lawbreaker. I stole a vehicle, and then
So
then I.
There are some tricky ordinance things that we still need to work through to get them tight. That's my message. It's constant.
I don't think you should be towed in a lot of the cases, but I totally understand that there is discretion, and if there were some way to write that into ordinance, I think that would be a good alternative to these kind of very, very limited, like, you will absolutely never get a ticket if it's these conditions, or you will get this precise combination of penalties if it's this violation and your first time, and it's a weekday.
That's precisely what we're going to bake into ordinance. That's our intent for sure.
If you're a repeat offender, then you do it all the time, every week.
So we don't want to tow people, but just a quick anecdote, just to give you sort of what we deal with daily, is we have people that they have a $575 in account balance, and it's $275 here in Scoff. It's over $275, so they'll come in, they'll pay $201 and get down to $274, so they're not in Scoff, so they don't get their car towed. Well, what happens the very next week? They get another ticket, and then 2 weeks after that, they get another ticket right back in Scoff. Then we tow them. So it's just really hard. This is a very blunt tool for education, and it doesn't really work. And I think to your point, we need to find a way to educate the public better, and I'm hoping that some sort of progressive approach will ease us into that.
All right. But under the circumstance that I brought up initially, I probably shall not be towed. Right?
Under the, I can't exactly answer that right now because that is a very special case that we just literally sort of discovered ourselves this morning as we were talking about this. Shape and I were talking. So we need to figure out that practical reality.
Meter violations aren't towed.
Meter violations are not towed.
So
So that's my interpretation of it. It's not a no parking violation. It's a meter violation parking. It's a meter violation situation. But I think it needs to be tightened up because I can see gray area.
I hope the right people shall be towed.
Just not you.
I don't drive.
Well, there you go. You'll never be there.
All right, Commissioner Damiani.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is just as you're going through that matrix of the 50 different things, I hope that the sort of percentage discount stays to a lot of them. I think from my standpoint, that's the middle ground that I see for this. And I think in terms of equity, that sort of helps address it sounds like a lot of the conversation for equity is around the immediate, either adjacent business owners or adjacent residents in like a resident parking area. But the equity, I think, also should be on the person getting the ticket. And I think that percentage discount helps with that. And then maybe in addition to the little civic contribution, if you are going to throw away the ticket, please put it in one of the new toters that Burlington residents have just purchased.
There you go. Recycle. Can be used again.
Very good, thank you. Is it safe to say that, as you introduced, we're talking one sort of narrowly scoped conversation today for like the safety related stuff. Is this kind of conversation forthcoming for other categories of things like the overstaying the meter?
Well, the overstay on the meter is $15 and no tow.
Mhm.
And my opinion is that's not a terribly steep penalty and that we don't get complaints about it. People are upset. They come in mad,
Right.
slap their ticket down. They pay the $15, they go away. But does it feel as acute as this? If you feel it is, then
Okay. This thing I sort of generally on the topic of discretion, of course, that when there's discretion, there's opportunity for bias, implicit bias, something to keep in mind as far as sort of training to make sure that's in mind for the folks that are, tasked with carrying out this discretion.
well, there won't be any discretion. It will be code. They won't have a choice.
It'll be clearly
It will be
spelled
code.
out. Yeah.
It will be, if this is their first offense, they get this progressive thing. If it's their second, they get this thing. There will be no discretion. We can't give them discretion. I'd love to, but for all the equity reasons, the bias reasons, the constitutional reasons.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, thank you. All right. We've made it around the commission here. Anyone in the room? Public comment on this item? Mr. Goulding, is there anyone on the phone interested in public comment on this item?
Not at this time, Chair Hogan.
All right, thank you for that. Well, there's no action requested on this one. We'd appreciate sort of the context and where you're all headed on this. Thank you for the work on it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All righty. Moving forward, item 7 on our agenda, Main Street, Great Streets update. Welcome, a communication from staff.
St. Paul is a great street. With 3.
Champlain is a great one.
Wheelock with Public Works. I'm one of the project managers for Main Street. Just have Olivia here tonight, who is one of the other engineers managing our Main Street project. From VHB, who you met at a previous meeting. She's here to talk about parking today and not intersection. Do you want to?
Sure. I'll talk about much.
been informed, but we've conducted a parking study, inventoried and then studied both occupancy data and turnover data for all of the parking spaces in the downtown area, and then really concentrated on the core, the 5-minute walk zone to kind of the downtown core, that there is the perception of there not being enough parking. And so really wanted to see if we could document that, if that was true, or if there is parking available and it's just, not as easy to be found, et cetera. And then to really look at what the potential impacts could be of the Main Street project, and can that parking be accommodated, can that loss of parking or that parking demand be accommodated on other streets and in other lots? And we did find out some interesting things. There's a lot of data here. I'm going to try to just give you a high-level overview, but we can drill into anything specific if you want.
Show you some slides. This is what was in your packet, but converted into a presentation kind of PowerPoint so that it is a little bit more visible on the screen here, but really all of the data and information behind this is part of the draft study that was in your packet.
Yeah, this is really just a summary kind of instead of going through every detail in that report. So basically, as I just said, the background is that obviously, parking should help support the city's multimodal and climate goals. There was concern regarding the project impact, what that impact would be on parking. And one of the context things that we started to talk about is that COVID has kind of changed some of the demand over time. And so there's a lot of perceptions, there's a lot of anecdotes, but there was very little data. So we really wanted to collect data and also take a look back at the past study that was done back in 2015 and see how things have changed since that time. And we also got a fair amount of information from the parking office just about what they're seeing in trends. We'll get into that a little bit. So first we took a look at the utilization, and this shows over the course of the day how the parking study area utilization was over the course of the day. And what you can see is on street on the weekday and the weekend is much higher demand than what is seen off street in the parking supply. And I think that is very important, and we'll get into why that is later and kind of how that changes in our perception of the availability of parking. But so you'll see circled on each of these is when those peak timeframes happened. When those peak timeframes, those peak demand times happened. And we'll, as I said, we'll get into the specifics of some of that. But this graph just really highlights that difference between, in green, you have the on-street demand up in 70s and 80% occupied, and you have the off-street parking significantly lower than that for occupancy data. It's a little difficult to see here, but on the curb, on the lines that are on the streets, you'll see red, perfect. Red for, the highly utilized blocks, down to green is a very underutilized block. So you can see there are some blocks very utilized, and as you get a little further from kind of that center, you end up with some blocks that are a little less utilized. And this is during that, kind of peak time window. So this just highlights just even how much in the study area that variation was. And one of the other things we like to look at is turnover, and that really actually dovetails very well in the presentation that just occurred. One of the things that is a concern is if your spaces aren't turning over when they should, it does have an impact on the retailers, and we definitely heard that from the advisory committee. There's that real concern that that parking isn't turning over and that the parking spaces aren't available for their retail customers as much as need to be. So if I park my car in what should only be there for 2 hours and I leave it for 4, that's a missed opportunity for, another customer basically to come in and park in that space. And of course, the worst of this is when you have a full day employee who parks in one of those spots and the customers aren't getting that benefit of the turnover of that spot. So similar to the others, the shortest duration, the quickest turnover spaces are shown in green. That's the more positive. Some of the reds are the longer terms. And in this case, the longer term parking is usually on those unregulated blocks too, where there is less signage and regulations telling people that they have to move along. So off-street parking, so we've now discovered that there is a lot of availability, a lot of supply available off-street. And one of the things that we started to look at is really what's keeping people from going off-street. And if we zoom in on the left side of that screen, this is just an example of some of the signage at some of the lots and how some of them, even if you read all the signs, you can get very overwhelmed. Like, can I actually park here? Am I supposed to? How much is this going to cost? A lot of it doesn't make sense. And it's, am I going to be towed? Oh no, just during the day. I might not stick around long enough to read all of the signs to really be able to understand. There isn't consistent signage. There's inconsistent messaging. And one of the other things that we found is some of these off-street lots are costing more than the on-street parking. So we're really disincentivizing people from parking in these off-street lots and garages, and that is where we'd like them to park, especially if they'll be there for a longer time. We also just quickly mentioned on safety and security. I know that's something the city is working on, and there's been some study about those multimodal connections. How do you feel once you get out of your car and you're walking? Is there a safe sidewalk? Is it a smooth sidewalk? Really to make that the most enjoyable and comfortable trip if we are asking them to park somewhere that isn't right out on the street, right out in the open. So we started to look at the availability and who owns some of these lots. And so the concern that we end up seeing here is a number of the lots really in that downtown core. That blue is what we considered that 5-minute kind of walk shed to that urban commercial core. Is that there's a number of those that are not available to the public on the weekdays until a certain time. And because of that, you might not be getting as much utilization of them. And in a lot of cases, I think that is the truth, that there were long-term leases for some of these spots, or they're reserved in case a new tenant comes into a building. And there's a lot of potential opportunity there. Having those lots not available during the weekday is a detriment, really limits then the parking supply during that time. I think I already mentioned that the parking rates also provide that disincentive to parking in these lots and garages. Because if I can park on the street for $1 or $1.50 an hour, and to park in a lot, I'm going to pay $4 an hour, I'm going to spend some time cruising those streets, adding to the congestion, looking for someone leaving a spot. And that's really why we're getting that really high utilization on the street and the lower utilization in those lots and garages. So one of the questions that came up is, how did we adjust for COVID? We looked at a lot of historic data, whether it was the study that DPW had undertaken back in 2015, as well as the data collected by the city in key meter zones. And we could really look at a pre and post-COVID time to see the difference. And what we found is the demand over time before COVID to now on street is very similar. There's very little different there. There should not be any adjustment to that demand. Now, that's not to say that demand may not have come out of the garages. It might be on the street, but those people are parking on the street. Those numbers have stayed very consistent over time. However, at those off-street facilities, we adjusted up by 40% because we really did see that, looking at historic data, that there still is, and I think some of that may be the softness in the office market and or that people are not driving to work as many days per week. The parking demand is not what it once was. And as I said, that comes through in some of the parking spaces that we know are leased to either buildings or organizations, and there's very low utilization associated with those leases. So we did make a COVID-19 adjustment. That's not to say this isn't the new normal, but I know we don't want to obviously plan for today if there is still going to continue to be a rebound in parking demand. We want to make sure that we're taking that into account. Yeah, if you could zoom in on that, that would be helpful. So ultimately, looking at the available parking, there's 120, this is at the peak time on a weekday, there's 124 on-street spaces available and 122 off-street spaces. So to me, as I looked at each of these, and again, it's in your packet, you can look in more detail, there's some blocks that only have one spot or have 0 spots available. There are a number of blocks that have more I double checked the math because I was like, I don't know if that really looks like 124. Yes, there are 124 parking spaces available in that 5-minute walk shed. And then the off-street number here is a little lower than what you'll see on Saturday, and that's really because all of those grayed out lots are not available currently. And we'll get into that, you know, a recommendation on that as we move forward. Shifting over to Saturday, a little lag on the screen share.
That's the age of my laptop.
So on Saturday, there are fewer on-street spaces available, but a lot more off-street spaces that are available. So the total supply is significantly higher on a Saturday. But again, if I'm visiting from out of town and I'm not sure which of those garages or lots I can park in, you know, I may not know that there's that much parking available. So we talked about a lot of potential strategies and really looking at pricing and curb regulation adjustments. And I think, you know, obviously it sounds like the parking department's delving into that sort of thing as far as the regulation. Really, in your high demand areas where you want a lot of turnover, you want them to be more expensive and you want them to be shorter term. And then as you move out from that radius, you can get less expensive and you can have longer time periods. But if you really want to encourage turnover of spaces and shorter trips, you want to price that accordingly so that that's the type of trip you get in that space, and that it isn't the type of place that I'm going to be there for 5 hours. I'm going to take a chance and see if I can sneak by and not get that ticket in the meantime. We do also want to continue to enhance those multimodal links, as I said, really to get someone to park in a garage. In fact, one of my coworkers commented specifically, she ran the parking study and commented specifically she went to park in one of those garages and felt very uncomfortable when she pulled in and didn't get out of her car and instead drove back out and found somewhere else to park. And so it's really making that whole experience more comfortable and more desirable. And then one of the things that was brought up in the advisory group that we think would be important is really starting to talk to the owners of the additional supply, especially in that core area. There is plenty of parking supply there that could be better shared and better available, and really discuss things like pricing. And I think we might get into that on the next slide with those private owners too, because if those lots, if they really understood what we found and like how much of an opportunity they're missing out because they're charging this much, whereas if they charge this much, they might get 10 times as much demand. You know, that could be a good partnership and a good discussion to have. Parking signage and wayfinding is something that would be very helpful so that when I am the visitor coming in from out of town, it's very clear to me where parking facilities are that I can park in. Obviously, we want to continue to invest in TDM practices. We don't want to continue, and I know the city feels strongly about this, we don't want to continue building parking for increasing demand. We obviously want to reduce that. And then really the enforcement strategy, which, you know, again, the conversation today was about, but continue that enforcement if we decide that certain, you know, meter segments should be higher turnover, really make sure that that enforcement is there. And I know that has been a challenge for the city in recent years. The final strategy is providing additional public parking. And we know in light of what's happening on Main Street, with some impact to the parking on street, there is some interest in that. And this is just an example of that gateway parcel of being able to get a 25% increase in parking by restriping and laying it out a little differently, being a little more efficient when we do have high demand off-street parking facilities like this, get as much as we can out of them. And one of the things you'll also find in the study is a discussion that as parcels redevelop, work with the owners to see if there is a way to let there be a public parking shared situation as well, so that that visitor can park once, visit those businesses maybe, and then also visit other businesses in the corridor and not have to move and look for a metered space to visit somewhere else.
So then this one's my slide. So just to speak a little to the schedule, and we're here tonight giving an introduction of the work that we've been doing, the data collection that we've had. It's pretty limited. So just to give an update, and also have an opportunity for you to provide feedback on this tonight, start getting it out there publicly, get it somewhere that it's recorded, that other people can actually hear Jen speak to the data, because it is a very complicated bit of information. And then where do we go from here? So in April, we look to come back, taking in some of the information that we're getting from the study, taking a good look at where the Main Street concept is going. We're gonna start sharing some ideas we have about how we're laying out the regulation along the street based on the interactions that we've been having with businesses. We've been meeting with dozens and dozens of businesses over the last few weeks, to really have time to sit down, talk about the project, and talk about what their business needs are for employee parking, customer parking, client parking, truck deliveries, and also activation of the right of way. So we'll start that conversation, as well as we want to start the conversation about what parking regulation changes we might look forward to have during our construction timeframe. So during construction, the on-street spaces on Main Street are going to be unavailable at various different times, and it can't be expected, based on the way our network is currently assigned, that those side streets or some other places are going to just absorb that loss of immediate parking. So we have a few strategies that we're working on that do require regulation changes. So we will start introducing those ideas ideally next month. It's a lot to bring forward, and you also have other things going on. So that's our goal. But if you miss it, there's also May. This all just might shift by a month. The following month, after being able to start this introduction and essentially give a pretty substantial comment period for people to react, is to come back and start concluding some of these things. We do want to conclude the downtown parking study in May. That one I don't see shifting. Assuming we get to you in April with a good amount of information, maybe start looking at effectuating some of the regulation changes that'll happen in the final condition. Probably not all of them. We have a lot to still nail down, but there's some substantial changes that we want to capture. But more specifically, the temporary construction ones. Those are ones that I think that we can work through fairly quickly. And it'll also be a really successful model as we put this project out to bid. Which speaks to the last bullet. We are looking to bid the project at the end of June, with a contractor awarded selection around late August, early September, and likely a start of construction in November. That is kind of the super high level. It is a lot of information and questions.
Great, thank you for that. Good stuff. So I'll start on this end again. Commissioner Fox, would you kick us off there?
Well, thanks for the presentation and the report in our packets. I loved reading it. So much detail, so much data. It was really interesting. I read a lot in the packet about one of the strategies or recommendations being wayfinding and signage to our garages, and I think that's super important, but that just can't be the only thing that we do to drive people to use them. And I know you mentioned changes in pricing. I'm supportive of that, is there a way we can make on-street parking a little more expensive and maybe lower the rates in the garage to just get people into them, to get them into that experience of parking in the garage if it's way cheaper. Beyond that, I think there are other ways to sort of think about how we're identifying where capacity is and when it is. And what I mean by that is thinking about, I'm thinking about these bike counters that show you how many bikes have gone over a strip of space. And so is there a way to show, like, for a section of parking or for in the garages, like how many spaces there are? I know that there are like crowdsourced apps, like I've heard of like something called ParkZen at Louisiana State University, which is like literally an app that shows you when people are moving from parking spaces just because they're putting it in an app. And so, I don't know, thinking creatively about that real-time information so that people can make the best parking decision possible. So yeah, those are some sort of initial thoughts. Yeah, and the other question I sort of had, and you mentioned this a little bit, is that safety and security piece. I mean, I've heard anecdotally, and you mentioned it, like that people don't necessarily feel safe and secure using our parking garages, which is, you know, really sad to hear. And I wonder if we have any sort of like qualitative information to sort of back that up.
I do want to note that the employee wasn't parking in a public parking garage.
Oh,
They
okay.
were in a private garage.
Very true.
When they felt unsafe. But in our business owner meetings, we are hearing from the business
Yeah.
community parking, more specifically with the downtown garage because of the downtown employee parking program, that some of their staff had previously felt less safe, and just kind of stopped trying. I've encouraged a lot of them to try again with the change in the way that the garages are organized, the way the staff is more circulating the garage. We've made lighting improvements. It does feel different. We don't have study data since we've made those changes yet, though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are sort of all my thoughts and questions on this. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, like I said, I really appreciated the data and the recommended future strategies also. I think a lot of them make sense. You know, maximizing the use of existing parking, information technology, improving mobility options in TDM. I think those are all important pieces of this puzzle also. So I just wanted to say that. I think that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Barr.
Thanks. I agree with a lot that Commissioner Fox relayed to you, that this is a very detailed study and it's one of the best ones I've seen for the downtown park. So lot of you for that. I know that I participated, I can't remember how long ago it was, in an unofficial study where we would drive around at night and count all the spaces, and we got something like 1,300 spaces within a block of the downtown area that people were complaining, I can't ever find parking. And I have to say that I've never not found parking. It's never been right in front of where I want to be, but a block away, 2 blocks away. But one of the strategies that I think we implemented was to increase the price of parking in downtown, the downtown metro area, if you want to call it that, and expand the enforcement for that to try and dissuade employees from parking there. But it sounds like there's still parking there. And I guess I would ask this, I don't know if you have data on this, are employers paying for that parking or giving some sort of subsidy for it?
Not in the conversations that I've heard so far. Some of them are paying their employees really, really well. I met with a business,
that's nice.
A restaurant owner that mentioned that their servers make $60,000 a year.
Getting good
That
tips.
keeps them there, and so then they can afford to park on street.
Right.
I've met with property owners that are like, yeah, we have this parking lot, but I know of 6 employees that park out front on Main Street all day long. Because that's something they can afford to do.
Right, and you're never going to be able to get all of the people by making, and you can't make it so high price that a normal person can't park there.
We don't want it empty.
Right. And one of the things, and I know that it's been looked at, and I don't know how deeply it's been looked at, is to try and either incentivize or I don't know if you can force employees to park in underutilized lots and then give them transportation options to get to their employee, where they work. Have you looked at that?
No.
Can you? I mean, it's probably not part of the scope.
The TDM measures that the Office of Planning is working on studying, both with ordinance changes as well as if there's just kind of a flat out city total change that permitting doesn't trigger, that this new work does. But that is very early in its infancy to start up.
Yeah. We do have free employee parking in the underutilized downtown garage.
But they still choose to park.
I mean, we're trying to create a financial incentive to drive the people who know the downtown the best, which are the folks who go downtown every day, to utilize the spaces that the more infrequent visitors to downtown don't know. So we're trying. We've got more to do.
No.
Yep.
That's the age-old problem. You can try as hard as you can, and there's still going to be the challenge for it unless you actually prohibit.
That's right.
People that work there.
And then one of the challenges is that the downtown employee parking program is very specific to service type workers and retail workers, people who don't necessarily always hold the highest paying positions in our city and certainly don't control the rate. I would like to highlight, when we implemented the smart meters and changed our rates and changed that structure, it was 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that study came with a lot more recommendations that we didn't implement because the first couple of years were hard.
Mhm.
There was a lot of change for Burlington that hadn't happened in a long time. And then there was a pandemic. But it does feel like we're right at that right time, that some sort of time limitedness in the core, which the smart meters don't have. There's no time limit on them. So they pay their meter, they sit there, and they are have enough day at $1.50 an hour.
And well, one of the things at my previous position is we actually removed all meters on campus and we made it all the mobile payment system. And that created the ability to section it so that, I'm sorry, you've got a 30-minute parking allocation here. You cannot increase that. And then you can't even move to another area within that zone or you'll be ticketed. I don't think we're there yet because I got a lot of flack from, well, you're making it so that only one way can pay it. And we did find other ways to help supplement people that maybe didn't have a smartphone and could use the app. But so another thing that I wanted to mention too is, and wayfinding is extremely important in this. And I think we've made good improvements in the city. There's always room for more improvement. But if you don't have spaces available for people, all the wayfinding in the world, because it's just going to point them to a full space. The idea that Commissioner Fox brought up about having some sort of ability to tell where is the best place to park, where am I going to find a space. Unfortunately, in our climate, you can't put those little hockey puck sensors under 6 inches of ice in some cases and be able to actually read it. But if there's ways to do it, again, if there was a way to move to a mobile payment system, that can tell you whether the space is being used at any given time. And that can give you the data that you need, which might be able to somehow be tied to an app that tells them, if you come over here, there's a space for you.
I know Jeff, as you've heard, is very creative. He's presented internally the switchover of the payment systems and the percentages that are going from being cash or card to Park Mobile, which is the city's app at the moment, and it's an increasing number. Every month, there is more and more of our revenue stream that is coming in through that system. So on street for Main Street, when it gets redeveloped, will be kiosks. So the meters themselves will go away. The mobile pay option with a kiosk with a zone is the direction that we're headed.
I know that it actually saved us money when we did away with coin-operated meters, because just the fact that you have to send somebody around, and then in many cases, especially if there's a lot of revenue, you have to hire law enforcement to be security when you bring it to the bank and do deposits and all those kind of things. It actually saved us, like, I don't want to throw a number out because I'm being recorded, but it saved us a large sum, probably somebody's wages for a year.
Enough to buy enough kiosks.
Yes, definitely enough to do that. So that's all.
Thank you. Vice Chair Nevavalko.
All right. So in Northampton, Mass, I think Director Spencer, I may have forwarded this to you a few years ago. My daughter's in college there, and on their public parking pins, what are those big, big signs? It'll say public parking, and there is a digital readout that says 254 spots. So I know that costs money, but that piece of wayfinding, that's maybe, kind of more city owned as opposed to an app, because then you have to have the app, and then you're like my father. You just drive around.
All those old people are
I know,
slowly
also,
drifting
right,
away.
exactly, as I put on my readers. So the better wayfinding to direct folks there. But I think I'm going to talk mostly about this, the safe and secure car parks. You can collect all the data that says, like, we have this parking, but no one's parking here, unless we actually just start looking at some of the qualitative pieces of why are you not parking there, and asking, like, this is often a gendered thing, often an age thing. So where women, where children, where elderly people feel safe is then other people will feel safe. So, I think of, the lake, what is it? Isn't it now called the downtown garage?
Yeah.
Where I was kind of most recently, and it needs it needs better figuring out in there, kind of where you're going, what direction you're heading, where's the exit to Bank Street, and so forth. That helps one feel comfortable if you know where you're going instead of looking around. Also, like I think about the car park at the hospital, the medical center. Have you been there lately? You know how they have, so it's also just moving around as a human in a space for vehicles where it's dark and people are moving backwards, right? And so they have, you know, and this is just paint on the ground. They have kind of those dotted line areas that kind of tell you where it's just a little bit safer to walk and where you can cross. Not that everyone follows those, but if there are lines on the ground, most humans will tend to kind of walk in or near them. So I think looking at strategies like that is, you know, an enhanced safety feature where, you know, you're just like, am I walking between cars? So I think looking at some of the, you know, kind of qualitative research on getting to what is a safe and secure feeling in a car park would also help. If you think about some of the service workers, who are those service workers? What time are they leaving their work? And that might be why they're parking on Main Street all day long, because, you know, at 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, whatever, whenever their shift ends, that parking lot could be fantastic. But if the journey from their place of business to that car park feels sketchy, then we as a city have a problem, not only for that worker, but also for visitors. So these are kind of bigger systemic things, but that all, my little soapbox done. Love the research on this, and I'm also one of those people who knows there's plenty of parking downtown, but we need to point folks to it and keep a TDM on the horizon. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's wrap around here to Commissioner Damiani.
Sure. So the sort of impetus for this study is the Main Street reconstruction project, and I was just curious as to why sort of the largest private parking lot at the bottom of Main Street, the Main Street Landing parking lot, wasn't included in the study.
So in talking with the property manager for the Main Street Landing, they lease and is still being paid to an adjacent business for the majority of the spaces in the parking facility, and that goes to what Jen has been mentioning. There are a lot of people who are still holding those office space leases for parking, and they're being paid. So property owners, managers are less motivated because they don't want to be in violation of their contracts. But yeah, a lot of it is.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I mean, I see every weekend they're charging sometimes $20 for somebody to park there for the entire day. I mean, I wouldn't pay $20 to pay there for the day, or park there for the day. But it's just an unfortunate that's. I know it's sort of outside of that even 5-minute walk shed, but it's right there at the end of this corridor that we're talking about. Other than that, I think with the renaming of the Lakeview and College Street parking lot to be downtown, I think it'd be great if the document references that. I think it references downtown maybe in the maps, but College and Lakeview in the text. So I think just making sure to.
That name change happened in the middle.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
Just put in parentheses or something.
Yeah. And then with the downtown garage, I think as we sort of talk more about pricing or other strategies to get people into the parking garage, I was sort of just thinking about that one. That seems to be the largest and most underutilized parking garage we have in the city, especially in this core. Most parking garages are on flat surfaces, so people typically don't want to go all the way to the top, and they want to go on the first 2 floors. But for that parking garage, most people are probably heading towards Church Street, so the sort of top 2 floors typically get filled first. So just trying to think about maybe I don't know, the bottom half has a different pricing structure than the top half or something to that effect for that parking garage as we talk about pricing structures.
That's a really creative idea to shape it, writing it down to be able to pass along to Jeff, and even the top, the very
Right.
What was the Lakeview garage is also one of those places people don't like to find themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the last thing too, I think in terms of the sort of safety for folks going from the downtown garage, this is still many years out, but I think as the street network across City Place gets developed and City Place itself gets developed, that certainly is hopefully will improve the safety along that corridor for folks walking from Church Street or to that parking garage. But yeah, but that's certainly a long ways away. So I know there's certainly immediate fixes. I don't know what can be done in a construction zone along that corridor to be done, but
I think one of the largest limitations is that there used to be a very easy walking path, and I did it myself many times of the day, random hours after being a downtown employee, is the construction of 79 Pine is blocking one of the major routes that
Yes.
people used to feel safe.
Mhm.
I was like, I'm walking past the bank, and if anything happens to me, at least everybody will be able to figure that out. So, you know, that connection right now has been missing in the
Right.
community for almost 2 years, but hopefully very soon.
that's all I had.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Montano.
Wow. this is amazing data. I guess occupancy was assayed everywhere in that downtown core at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, with N of 2 weekday weekends.
Olivia and all of my staff and other folks from the city all to work on it. It was a huge undertaking. On 95-degree days.
Oh, right on. I may have ran into you one day this summer, and I was kind of wondering what you were doing. Yeah, and this is 67 parking spots are going to be affected. In
Up to. So we studied a maximum loss of parking of 67. That is not necessarily what the final design is going to be. The
Right.
final design is going to be less than 67.
Right on. I don't know if that's the doomsday scenario, but the one where you assume 40% upward, where there's no occupancy at all in the marketplace garage, and there's still 200 to 300 parking spots available within that 5-minute
Yeah, I think
radius. Is
that
that
is an
that sound about right?
That's an unlikely scenario, but we still wanted to make sure that if the parking demand did go back to pre-COVID numbers, and that means all of us who are enjoying that work-life balance from working from home a couple of days a week don't have that anymore, that demand could all come back. So we wanted to test for that doomsday scenario, as you labeled it.
Oh boy.
And then in your packet is the actually as studied projections. On page 10 is the non-projected numbers.
Yeah, the report has non-projected numbers and then has the numbers with that increase as well. So you can
Beautiful. So who asked you to do this again in 2022? Like, well,
Generally, most of the business community, BBA, Church Street Marketplace, a lot of the businesses just wanted to ground truth. You know, we talk about those of us that are a little bit more invested in parking. You know, we believe that there's parking. We know that there's parking available, and a lot of people, it's not their business to know parking. It's their business to know how to sell something. And so they've asked us to ground truth it again. It's been a while since we'd studied it. It was a pandemic, so that's one of the reasons for the update.
how much do you bill an hour? I mean, you have to share that, but like the total price of the study would be a good piece of information to know, just for public record. Oh yeah.
We paid about $90,000 to be able to do all of this data collection, update this analysis. I would say we've learned more than just to prove that we have available parking from this, which is there's some really amazing information in here as it relates to also helping with what we do from here forward. It's also tied into some other very adjacent proximate work. It's probably brought down some of the data collection that's necessary as we move on to the Battery Street corridor. So it's not in vain. This project had the ability to afford it, but and it's just been a while.
Not at all. Like this is it's just good science, good engineering, and I hope we like as a city, right, not just the businesses that are kind of using all the TIF money to get this kind of thing could think these ways about other problems that we could be solving together. And that's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby.
I want to second all Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanka's comments about the safety things. So a lot of what I might have suggested, you've already been brought forward, and also Commissioner Damiani's questions as well. So everybody's asked some of the things that I would want to ask. However, I did want to emphasize your comment about the problem with the availability of private off-site parking. And I know that it's been, I don't know if it was while this Director Spencer was in, but you were director at the time. We went through this inventory of the downtown parking off-street and on-street. Maybe that was in 2015, but the intent was to work with contracts with private parking, parking lots. And when we look at the paper the document that you have on page 19 that really shows the ownership of the public ownership and the private, it's very revealing of what happened years ago when there was. So I'm curious. I know you've mentioned the fact that there needs to be maybe some work done to negotiate with the people that have their private lots managed by the private company who is now managing them, which is in the document. And I'm wondering if you have asked the people that own the private lots the terms and the duration of the contracts that they currently have with the private vendor that they are currently using.
So DPW is engaging one of our community partners to start these conversations. We're going to start with the parking management company first, just to talk about the data that we found, the holes that we found in the system that don't seem well utilized, hoping to have a proactive conversation about their rates, the structure, the facilities, so that they can then go back to the property owners. I have met with a few of the property owners that do use, another service to manage their lot, offered our service as we recently developed it during the Winooski Corridor project. They weren't quite ready to move over yet. They seemed generally satisfied with what was being provided, but this is a lot that is well utilized, people that I've met with so far. So we've not met with a lot of them yet, but it is on our docket to do. You have anything else to add, Chapin?
Thanks.
I think I just think it was it short-circuited the work that the commission was doing and that the Public Works Department was doing to have that situation happen. And so, in my opinion, somebody needs to look at the duration of the contracts, and it sounds like that is something that somebody is going to be doing. Right, because I really, and you mentioned the North Winooski parking management study, and we know it's the same sort of problem, that there's plenty of parking off-site, off-street, but there are challenges to the utilization of that by people, and the fact that you've developed this program where you would be willing to do the work for 80% cut to the owner of the property and the city does the work. I think we just really have to keep finding ways to release that off-site parking lot, and so having it available and not $4 an hour, which is another deterrent to visitors that park and then they go to the kiosk and they're shocked, and then bad things spread around about the experience. So I just think it's very helpful that people might want to look at the page 19 of your study that very clearly shows the magnitude of that situation. And hopefully that can be, dealt with in the future. I know that it related to one of the other things that you had pointed out also in the document, page 18, about the clarity of the signage. And by having this mixture of city signage and the signage where there's bags over a kiosk and then there's no bag, and it's like, it's really horrible for people that are visitors, and they're the ones that probably get stuck in those lots and don't realize it, and then I have heard some nightmare stories about that. So the other questions that I had, you had mentioned obviously the multimodal links to parking facilities. Do you have suggestions because what you mean by that when you're talking, let's say, how to get from the downtown parking garage to Church Street?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things are really simple and are just a matter of, actually, one of the other commissioners brought it up. When you're in the garage, I might not remember if I've gone up 2 levels, which direction I need to head to get to Church Street. Like, how do I get directed there? Where should I go? Where are the stairs that'll get me to the path that gets me there? And then some of the other issue is those connections that Laura mentioned that may not be there or may not be as desirable. And that could be the safety and security piece, but that could also be the condition of the sidewalk. That could also just be how circuitous it is. So it's really thinking about what that whole trip is and how do we make it so that I get out of my car, and again, as a woman or with young children or whatever it is, it's very clear to me where I need to go, and I feel very comfortable taking that route.
Are there companies that have expertise in doing that kind of work with parking garages that you're familiar with?
I would think in most cases it's done as a part of, a city project to review, sidewalks and streetscape overall, because it really fits into the, basically how the streetscape is put together and how smooth it is it accessible by everyone? Is the lighting correct? It's more like almost a landscape architect's type of position. So yes, it is certainly something that can be done.
Well, I mean, I'm no parking expert, but things to me, and it's been an issue with me, the wayfinding from the downtown parking deck to Church Street, and how do you get there, and that sort of thing now that you walk along between the bank and the current Burlington High School is. But it just feels like we don't have the expertise of creativity. I mean, like, is it lighting? Is it paint? Is it, I know, I just feel like we're struggling with the use of that parking deck because of the, and there's other factors too. I think the height of it, the ceiling height is low, and that makes it feel unsafe as well. But it really, we can't fix that. But we could maybe do, like, I don't know if you've ever been to Chicago Airport and you go through those walkways that go between one terminal to the other, and there's lights and music happening. Again, I would think that, I think that we need to be very innovative about it, but who's going to do that? And it's like, is that a company that does that kind of thing? Otherwise, or do we incorporate artists to come in and do that? And I know we approved recently the high school using the top floor of that for a portion of their outdoor education setup. So, obviously the commission here isn't going to do something like that, and you're not going to probably do something like that, but I don't think we're ever going to succeed with getting that parking garage being a pleasant, safe feeling place unless we really do something creative. And the multimodal thing is, should we have some sort of trolley? Should we, so that you don't have to walk? That's another option. Or those little pedicab things, another option. I just feel like we keep circling around that problem, and I would like to find a way to better, come up with a solution to that. It's not related to the Main Street project, but it's related to what's been a problem here for 10 years, or more than 10 years. You actually mentioned also related to that, the Amtrak Connections project. What is that?
That was a study that was undertaken by CCRPC to look at if people are coming to Burlington and want to take the train, where do they end up parking? And does it make sense that they park in the downtown garage? And if so, how do they know how to get to the Amtrak and then get back to the garage later.
Mhm.
So it really did look at some of those connections and how those connections could be improved for all users.
Well, and it relates to the fact that we now have the downtown transit center for the buses a, a distance away from the train, and the parking. And so we really don't have these things connected for convenience of a person visiting, coming up on the train or coming in on the bus and trying to get to the train. So just more things to think about. Let's see, I think I answered that question. One of the things that you did mention was that that there should be that implementation of the comprehensive parking signage and wayfinding system before the Main Street construction. Is that something that is actually in the works so that we can actually see that happen? So that people, I think your guidance was that so that people get used to parking in these alternate places, so they're already ready and have no problem with it when all of a sudden their favorite little angle parking spot's not available on Main Street. Is that going to happen? I mean, are we able to do that? Is that going to happen? Or is the timing of it such that that guidance cannot possibly happen?
I think some construction-related signage and some other wayfinding tactically can happen. A large kind of publicly funded, grant-funded project at this point doesn't have time to be implemented before November. But the interest is absolutely to do something to enhance connectivity to new spaces and new lots.
Yeah, just to move people, as you say, so that we have less pain because it'll already be a familiar operation.
Yeah, and just to speak to that a little bit, our finding is, and the previous program that we had was a federally funded program. It afforded a teal sign with the standard P logo so that people could identify it. But that funding source was limited to only directing people to public parking. So we couldn't even have a sign that said, 5 p.m., standard P, try this lot or try that lot or turn left here. The TIF funding isn't as limiting as that, and so we have the opportunity to add that information to our existing wayfinding system to help people find some of those high capacity, off-street, privately owned opportunities where there's no language out there right now, and they're clearly creating their own.
Well, this could be an opportunity for a couple of the lots that would be in a good position to take over this 67 loss or whatever, up to 6, because that's where you could get that private lot owner to come up with a plan right now for this construction project. And, you'd have to work with the private vendor that's managing the parking. But to follow your guidance, I think that would be a good thing to do, like you recommend, so that people are not, they're practiced. They get the practice, and they might like better whatever. This has nothing to do with the, I'm changing subjects here, but can you provide an update on the Ravine Sewer project?
So the Ravine Sewer portion of the work has a preferred alignment that's been identified. There is a document on the Great Streets website that can give some information about that. Is all right. So here is the Great Streets homepage. It has a scrolling marquee. If you come down, you'll be able to find, there it goes. There's the Main Street bubble. If you click in here, and actually you're going to start to see some of this parking information show up on the page, but we have generally the most recent published information about where the project's at. So top of the list is all about water and sewer. There is the information on the Ravine Sewer. There's also information on just the water main and sewer main replacements throughout the entire corridor that went out to property owners. So in the Ravine Sewer, it was a little finicky for me. There is a map of the entire project corridor of the water and sewer replacement. And then this dashed line shows our alignment of the ravine sewer that'll come from behind the fire station out to Main Street, down Main Street to the corner of Church Street, and then from Church Street to Maple. It essentially is interrupting all of the flow in the pipe that comes from north of this location and moving it within our city's right-of-way versus the existing path which cross-cuts the city on a diagonal-ish path through here, going underneath properties, intersecting buildings.
So, yeah, well, it was originally the railroad bed,
It was originally the railroad, and it is a natural ravine that.
and it's a 6-foot tunnel, basically. That,
Yeah.
then, and it goes from the corner of College Street down to where you're connecting in farther down?
From where we are interrupting it at the fire station, it has a trajectory northeast of there out towards the Intervale.
But the other the other direction,
But the other direction, the southwest, we are interrupting it. So eventually these properties, this is how the TIF funding is able to pay for it. These properties have an opportunity to redevelop in a way that they never could before with this piece of infrastructure flowing underneath. The pipe will be a 48-inch diameter pipe. That's what's necessary to take its current flow.
in that
It's large.
that L-shaped thing.
We went a little off topic there from parking,
Yep.
but
Yep.
get to share the website. Some of the-
Thank you for that. I think, I know the question I looked at you. One question of how much of our TIF borrowing have we already done? Well, just, yeah, how much have we borrowed? Obviously, you're borrowing as you spend, but how are we doing with that?
City
What's,
has incurred all of its debt so far. So we've incurred $30 million of debt. That's sitting in our holding company that is holding the money as we spend it down.
and are the interest rates that we see happening everywhere, were you able then locked in?
We've already locked in.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. All right. I think
It was a fairly reasonable rate. It was a reasonable deal for the city. So while we borrowed $30 million through however it works out, we actually effectuate $34 million of money that we can spend.
do you know what the interest rate is? I usually multiple rates depending on issues or
I can
something.
find that for you, but that is not. my
No,
area.
I know, I was looking at it originally when it was being considered, so I sort of know what ranges, but I'm just curious with all the changes in interest rates, I was curious how well we did.
We solidified that in August of last year.
Oh, so it was hard to know, hard to know now.
Not the best, but it was before chaos.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I think that's covers the questions that I had. The other ones were absolutely covered well by the other commissioners. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Do you have questions? You didn't ask it.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Thanks. One, can you define or help me understand how you count turnover as a percentage? Sort of get the concept of like high or low, but like what does a percentage
Yeah,
mean
so
for
that's
turnover?
the percentage of vehicles that turned over in 2 hours. And so we went around and noted plates every 2 hours. We did it by GIS, by block, so that we would even catch those people and understand if they appeared twice in the study or on different streets, then they aren't, it's still a turnover, they've still moved. And so that spot on that street did turn over. But so that's the percentage of spaces on that block that turned over in that period.
So like from the beginning of 2 hours to the end of 2 hours, how many spots have
Yes.
something
Have
different?
someone new in them.
Okay, regardless of whether it's a 3 hour zone or 4 hour zone or whatever. Okay, thank you. Yes, a lot of great stuff there. I would echo the enthusiasm and those questions from my fellow commissioners here. I feel like there's, in terms of like the data counts and stuff is very solid. Some ideas for the potential other layers of data collection come to mind on like pricier or harder things that would have blown this particular budget. But I feel like there's an opportunity for like the marketing angle there or some outreach to current or prospective users there. So really the recommendations are of the flavor of like shifting our levers, potentially like charging a little more for this or charging a little less for that. And, it'd be great to be sort of polling people, one on like some of the user experience questions that have come up of like, how was your parking experience today? Or like an open-ended like QR codes out there, or like on the Park Burlington website or whatever. Like, what was the worst part of your parking experience that we could potentially help with or something? What was the best part? Also, another layer of that, I think we've seen quantitative studies in other towns that show that some business owners persistently underestimate the proportion of people that get to their shops by non-private vehicles and overestimate the percentage of people that get to their businesses by private vehicles. And seeing that from other towns, it sort of makes sense anecdotally to me to think about a customer who maybe had a poor experience trying to find a parking spot, trying to find their way out of a parking garage, getting there. It's going to be like the front of their mind. They're like, it's a proprietor of business versus a customer that, say, had a pleasant walk to get there, or like just hopped off the bus stop right in front of it and didn't. It's like, they're not really sweet. That's how it should be. There's no trouble. That they're not going in and like venting about that, so people don't get an earful about that. And that it makes sense when I see that stuff from other towns, but I don't know if that still doesn't necessarily carry a lot of weight with proprietors in this town that don't care because their perception is their reality. In this data collection and communication exercise, there might be angles there to sort of do some polling of those numbers for our businesses. How'd you get here today? How was your experience? Ask the shop owners, how do you think your people got here today? How was their experience? For what it's worth. I love the opportunities that this data sort of could be leveraged for other purposes. And I get, certainly if Division Director Paget was still here, he knows, and I ask him every chance I get, like, where are we with real-time counts? And there's legal things they're still working to get there, but I feel like that could be a huge tool in unlocking more possibilities here. Like, be easier to have a number to put up on the sign of like how many spaces are currently available. And I know, like, years ago, probably pre-COVID even, the idea was floated of somebody being able to look up before they drive from South Burlington or Williston or whatever, like they sort of like reserve a spot or like know that there is a spot for them before they get there. Like, I feel like all this sort of exciting stuff could be unlocked by the having real-time counts to feed this, but these static counts sort of go a long way, and I'm very appreciative of that. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. Thank you for the study.
Thanks.
The presentation here. Good stuff. Let's check. I don't see anyone in the room for public comments. Mr. Goulden, could you do a quick check on the phone? Is anyone interested in speaking public comment on this item?
Not at this time, Chair Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Goulden. That there's no action requested on this one, but I do very much appreciate the update. Sure, we'll see you soon. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 8, Director's Report.
All right. Thanks to staff for running the show tonight. It's first I've got a chance to weigh in on a few things. So there is a parking ban tonight. You heard that from Division Director Jeff Paget. While the temperatures have been warm today, they're going down to 22 tonight. All that wet snow is going to lock up. We wanted to clean up the city for safety. So please park off street tonight. Parkway construction season is about to restart mid-April as we get underway with our construction season. The initial work will be on the rail crossings on Flynn and Home Avenue. There's some communication going out soon about closures, one-way traffic, and the like in those areas. They will then move in later summer to Lakeside Avenue and Pine Street, and stay tuned for more construction mitigation news on that front. We are also going to City Council this coming Monday, to the Board of Finance, and then to the following Monday to the City Council for our paving contract, as we discussed earlier tonight, and also the sidewalk contract for this coming year. Pleased that we got competitive bids on both of those, and looking forward to a good construction season. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. We'll move forward to item 9 on our agenda, Commissioner Communications. See here, start with Commissioner Montano.
Whoa,
Loop around the other way.
it's me. Yeah, there's a ton of exciting projects. Certainly, there's a parking focus at the meeting today. And I'm just kind of thinking about the other modes that people might be using to get into downtown, and in particular to get into Church Street, and kind of, if you're a visitor, right, how well can you maneuver around beyond just that Church Street core. So I guess I'm wondering maybe a brief Green Mountain Transit update regarding stuff.
Sure. Yes, I think one of the important things to notice, while we spend a lot of time talking about parking, it's the mitigation of parking in order to unlock a lot of exciting multimodal investments. So Main Street, the 6 blocks, for example, will be the city's first dedicated off-street cycle tracks on each side of the street, wider sidewalks, exciting stormwater features, bus shelters, and the like. So I'm excited about that. And while we have to talk about how parking can be accommodated, it's in service of those multimodal goals. Paving this year will also have Pearl Street repaved on the upper section, which will smooth out the bike lane in that section. Bike lanes will be added to Plattsburgh Avenue, as you all discussed last year. So that's on the docket. We are trying to secure more grant funding for the North Champlain two-way cycle track that we've talked about for a number of years. You may have, earlier in the meeting, we discussed the fact that the GO bond, general obligation bond, was not for as much as the city identified that we needed money for. So we're trying to write grants to fund a lot of this work so that we're not using our precious limited general fund money. So hoping that this year that we can secure some grant funding to do the lion's share of the work. North Champlain, because of the signal work at Manhattan and the concrete separation that we want to create, it's around a $500,000 project. It's not just plastic bollards and some paint. So, of course, the Champlain Parkway project, which will be under construction this year, will add the shared use path this year, all the way from Home Avenue up to downtown. So that will be installed this year as well as the sidewalk project construction that I referenced earlier. GMT coordination, we have a meeting with them this week or next week. Is it this week? I think it's next week, with their planning team to focus on a number of coordination issues, one of which is now with our downtown being restructured. New City Place through streets, Main Street reconstruction. The College Street shuttle has seen reduced headways and reduced ridership. It's probably time for us to look at how we route buses through our downtown. Where do we want to establish trunk lines? And where do we want to improve the shelter experience, have more higher frequency transit, so that we can really plan thoughtfully and not be back on our heels. So I'm excited to do all this work. Bike Share is going to come back with a top line company this year. We're in final negotiations with one of the leaders in the industry. So I'm bullish for this year.
All of that sounds so tremendous. It's a coming together of all of these things that, right now, if I took the train into Burlington from, say, New York, I wouldn't feel comfortable kind of maneuvering around on a bike I rented. But, within a few years, maybe I would, and maybe a lot of people would. And maybe people would decide you know what? I don't need a car living here in Burlington. And I think listening to people and kind of seeing if that's the future we want, really getting everyone's voices in that. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks for your support.
Thank you. Commissioner Damiani.
I think the only thing I had was around the toters. I was just curious as to how far along, like, do we have a target number that we know that we're trying to get to, and what percentage people have come in to get those? And I was just thinking, I was reviewing
Right.
the toter website just for the condo building that I live in, and I think it mentioned that once after May 1st, the recycling crew is going to put out little stickers on the bin as a reminder, but I'd be curious if that's possible to do sort of ahead of time now, before May 1st, to sort of remind people. Just another way to get it in people's face, maybe even at the bottom, because that's sort of where I look when I bring my recycling bin up to the second floor of my building, or upside down, wherever. Just adding another place to see it.
It's a great opportunity to thank our customer service team, who I know is taking notes tonight across the hall, doing incredible work responding to the large influx of people requesting toters ever since we sent out postcards to every resident in Burlington. Sales are quite strong. Our team, in between plowing, is delivering all the toters out. One of the things we're really trying to work through is educate a lot of the multifamily buildings to not get one small toter for each individual unit, but to get larger toters for the whole property. It will not work if we need to pick up 8 small toters at one parcel and then move to another parcel and have to pick up 6 toters. It's just, we're never going to be able to do our work. So that's been a lot of work at the front, trying to educating people that similar to how you manage your garbage, there's one central point on the property. And that's going to be what's going to enable us to make this work.
Is that a requirement, or is that more education that like a certain number of units have to sort of share?
It is a requirement in ordinance that a multi-unit property of a certain size needs to have a 65-gallon or greater toter, which is the middle or larger size. So our customer service team's been educating folks who reach out about that.
Great. That's all I had for today.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, looks like.
Oh, yes, we have Mr. Goulding, who's
All right.
been leading the outreach.
I just wanted to add the plan for the stickers is not to go out after May 1st. It's actually to go out once the snow stops flying, hopefully in the next week or so. We have stickers in transit. They should be here at the end of the week, and we plan on putting those on all of the existing blue bins during the next few weeks of pickup. So we'll try to be preceding the May 1st date by a couple weeks. So in addition to the landlord outreach, postcards, we've got the stickers coming soon and a social media ad campaign coming up soon. We've got advertisements in the BED bill, the water bill, the North Avenues, and we'll keep plugging away and hoping to catch as many people as possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. Commissioner Fox.
I don't have any comments this evening. Just thanks to DPW staff for the really detailed packet this week. It was awesome.
Good read. All right. Commissioner Barr.
Thanks. I only have one comment, and in your email, Chapin or Director Spencer, you might have received it or looked at it already. The Old East End is looking to try and do some things in their area, and just for the greater knowledge of everybody here, we're really trying to make it a safer place, and we've done some walk audits. We're working with AARP, working with CarShare, we're working with a lot of different people. One of the things that I suggested to them is that rather than come up with all these ideas themselves on traffic calming, is to find out what measures, what do you want done, and what are the measures that are in the kit bag here that we can probably implement. They're going after some funding, so we're going to have to see if there's creative ways for a neighborhood to help fund some of these things with Public Works. But that's, if we could just get somebody to join one of our calls, that would be great for like maybe a half hour.
Awesome. I followed up with Mr. Crowley today, gave him, Dayton Kreitz, who's our new senior transportation manager, planner. So Dayton's going to be following up with Mr. Crowley.
Great. I told him I'd say that, so.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Great.
Happy to support.
All right. Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Thanks for the snow removal. I'm kind of liking the wait until the snow finishes falling before you call this the parking ban, which I feel like in years past there would be a parking ban and we would still get snow. I don't know. I feel like the cleanup seems to be a little bit better. Over Lake Park sidewalk could use a little love. Throw that in there.
Okay.
As I slog down here tonight. No, and I do, thanks to Rob Goulding, because on the February 17th, a couple days after our last commission meeting, I got an email as a property owner. Did you receive a recycling tote? In my email, and I was like, so just awesome, I think. And of course, thanks, Rob. And there are going to be people who be like, what? I didn't hear anything. But at least like we know we have hit, as many marks as possible, aside from, just whacking people over the head with a blue pen, which would really be good public relations.
Rob's going to walk around Burlington with a sandwich sign, right, Rob?
I'm open to it. Open to whatever we have to do to make sure people aren't out of compliance on May 1.
Great job. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby.
All right, I wanted to just first thank the Ward 2, 3 NPA because they held a really nice session as part of their meeting last Thursday, where they were talking about the commissions and how the commissions work, and they had 4 different tables with different commissioners at them, and it was really interesting to participate in that as a public works commissioner, along with somebody at the table was downtown, the Church Street Marketplace Commission. But one of the things that came out of that was relating to graffiti and who's responsible for that. So that's a question that I'm going to toss out. I'm not asking of an answer, but I appreciated that particular format that they had for everybody that sat around the table. It wasn't, a presentation or anything. So that was really great. And all of you, maybe they'll do it again, and maybe some of the other ward NPAs would be doing the same thing. I think it was really an excellent way to get people to understand the commission system and what commissions are available and how it works. And how to apply, and particularly that things are going to turn over, in May and June for another year.
Right.
Also, I know I've communicated a couple times with Director Spencer about the private plowing companies that are, and I'm not sure if other people in the neighborhoods are having the same issue, but I had communication about the city's probably doing a great job of getting the streets plowed or the sidewalk, but there are people that are private plowing companies that are pushing this snow across into other people's driveway on the other side. And I don't know if there's a solution to that, but it feels like there needs to be something done to help communicate with people that are doing private driveway snow removal to help them understand. Apparently there's rules, and it's sort of another case of education. What can we do? And I had people, like more than one person, once the first person said it to me, I said something about it. And, oh yeah, that happens on Grant Street as well, instead of just Henry. The last thing I was going to suggest on the toters, you might want to help people understand that they don't need to put the toter out every week. If it's not full, don't put it out. Wait till when it's full. I just think that's another way to help reduce the number of them out there that the city's machine, guys have to pick up. So I don't know how you're going to communicate that, but yesterday was the pickup on my street, and it was obviously, what the weather was looking like, and I didn't put mine out, and I thought, is that something that we can sort of help people understand to help you guys out, so that's what I have to communicate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Quick on the topic of toters, I was got my postcard in the mail a couple weeks ago. Also, I am a happy user of a toter currently. So just suggest, I know there's sort of a cost benefit here. If there's any way to
For the record.
target those mailings to the crew that's you're still looking to get off of the bins for later communication. But I don't know where we are with our numbers of toter adoption quite yet, but I do see the pickup trucks delivering them.
Yes.
Curious, the previous parking ban, Saturday, March 4th or so, it was still over the school break. Do you have a sense of like how that went? Was there a lot of towing required or?
My recollection, Mr. Goulding, is that it wasn't abnormal. I think we towed over 200 cars, which is generally about what we're towing. Is that right, Mr. Goulding?
Yeah, I think it was well within the range of normal, maybe high end of normal. But if I recall, when we were doing the debrief, we didn't think it was unusual.
Great. I was coming home from the train station that night. Well, the train gets in at about 10 when the parking ban kicks in. And the parade of tow trucks was quite impressive. I had no idea that those kind of resources were brought to bear.
Like,
Oh, yeah, the line going down Pine Street. There were
it's like
10
cement
trucks, 12 trucks. It was, but as you mentioned, 200 cars
quite
getting
an
towed to support the
operation.
operation is quite
Yeah.
the thing. All right. Another thing, I had a sort of a worlds colliding moment today. There's a geeky conference on a particular web development technology that I pay attention to and use at my day job. And I was going to attend, and like a talk caught my eye. It was like about prioritizing sidewalk repairs. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, oh, it's from somebody from RSG. Oh, great. And it's like they're talking about the Burlington, Vermont sidewalks. And I was like, oh, all right. So broadcast around the world, this presentation today from an RSG staffer, pretty cool
Nice.
stuff. I'll follow up with staff on like some specific questions there, but a general question is, I wonder, how are we with getting that sort of stuff into our asset management system? The gist of that talk was like doing a separate tool to support the ranking and decision making around when we're
Yes.
repairing which sidewalks, but like more generally, like our sidewalks into the asset management thing. Yeah,
They are getting in there. The study with RSG did get it into GIS, and so that geospatial platform really gives us a really solid base on which to do the activity scores, which Laura, Senior Engineer Wheelock, has brought in the past, layering on top multiple things. How many public requests have we had to replace the sidewalk? What was the objective condition through the RSG report? And then, and then looking at the activity score of where it is and the level of use it gets to order to prioritize the work. So I'm pleased with how we do that work. I do appreciate the fact that, not everybody is into the data the same way we are and can wonder why their sidewalk's not getting addressed. So if people have concerns, they're welcome to reach out to Mr. Goulding, myself, and we're happy to answer questions. But
great. Thank you.
yes, that data is directing over $1 million of work this year, and I'm proud that we're doing that data-driven process.
Yeah, I'd love to see that objective, data-driven
Yeah.
decision making. That's great. Lastly, just an announcement that a scoping study for Battery Street is kicking off.
Thank you.
I'm sitting on that steering committee representing the Public Works Commission. It's really well represented by Public Works staff as well. One announcement there was like a committee meeting last week or the week before. Upcoming in mid-April timeframe will be the first public meeting around that. I don't have an exact date for that yet, but we'll get the announcement out that shortly when we got it. Watch for that.
Thank you for picking up that ball that I dropped in the director's report.
You got it. Nothing further from my commissioner communication. With that,
Motion to adjourn.
we'll move forward to item 10 on our agenda, adjournment, next meeting date, April 19th. We have a motion from Commissioner Barr.
Second the motion.
Excellent. We have a second from Vice Chair Neva Banco. Is there any discussion around that? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned, 9:07.